She was still wearing her apron. That was the first thing people noticed. Not the cracked guitar with the electrical tape along the body, not the shaking hands. The apron, the white cotton apron with the brass rail logo stitched above the pocket, the one she'd been wearing for the past 4 hours carrying plates of food to people who never once looked at her face. And now she was standing in the middle of that same room, holding that same guitar. And those same people were looking at her. Finally, just not the way she'd ever wanted. Someone at table 3 said something. The words didn't carry across the room, but the laughter did. It spread fast, the way cruelty always spreads in a crowded room, from one table to the next, feeding itself. A man near the bar turned around on his stool to see what was funny. A woman in the back covered her mouth, not to hide shock, but to hide a smile she hadn't earned. Annie Calloway stood at the microphone with her eyes down, and her fingers on the strings, and started to play. The opening chord of Hey Jude rang out across the brass rail. Nobody stopped talking. By the second bar, the laughter at table 3 had gotten louder. By the 4th bar, it had reached table 7. Someone near the front made a comment, short, throwaway, the kind that costs the person who says it nothing and lands like a fist on the person it's aimed at. More laughter followed. Annie's shoulders pulled inward. Her chin dropped slightly toward her chest. She kept playing. The way a person walks faster when they hear footsteps behind them in the dark. She was not performing anymore. She was surviving. For a moment, no one moved to stop it. But that moment didn't start there. Because in the far corner of that bar, at the table nearest the sidewall, the one with the bad sightline and the draft from the door, a man in a dark jacket was sitting completely still. He had ordered one drink 40 minutes ago. He hadn't touched it. He wasn't looking at his hands, or at the room, or at anything except the young woman standing at the microphone in the waitress apron with the cracked guitar. He had been watching since the moment she walked across the floor. He was the only person in that room who was not laughing. He was also the only person in that room who knew exactly, note for note, word for word from the inside out, what that song had cost to write. And he had just decided he was done sitting still. If you've ever been in a room that decided to laugh at the wrong person, stay right here. Because what happened in the next 4 minutes, inside the brass rail on that Tuesday night in October 1994, was never reported, never recorded, never written about. It was passed between the 11 people who saw it, in hushed voices, for 30 years. And it starts right now. Annie Calloway did not grow up wanting to be a waitress. Nobody does. But the distance between what you want and where you land is measured in specific things. Missed rent, canceled auditions, a transmission that dies on the highway 40 miles outside Nashville on the morning of the most important callback of your life. She was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, in 1968. Third of 4 children in a 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, where the walls were thin and the heat was unreliable. And money was something the family discussed in hushed voices after the kids were supposed to be asleep. Her father worked the line at an auto parts plant on Clinton Highway. Her mother cleaned offices 3 nights a week for a company that never learned her name. They were not unhappy people. They were tired people. And in that house, the one thing that never felt heavy was music. Her father played guitar on the front porch every Sunday without fail. Old country, old gospel. Hymns he'd learned from his own father in a church outside Gatlinburg that no longer existed. Annie was sitting beside him at age 5, watching his fingers move across the strings. By 8, she was playing alongside him. By 12, she was better than he was, and he knew it, and he told her so, and that quiet acknowledgement was the greatest gift he ever gave her. At 17, she played her first original song at a local talent contest at the Carousel Room in Knoxville. She placed second. First place went to a boy whose father owned the venue. She drove home alone, went to her room, wrote 3 more songs before midnight, and never once considered stopping. At 19, she moved to Nashville with $340 in cash and a guitar case held shut with a bungee cord. She slept on a friend's couch for 5 months. She played every open mic she could find. She got 4 callbacks in 3 years. Each one ended the same way. Not quite right. Try again. We'll be in touch. By 23, Nashville had made its decision about Annie Calloway. So she made hers. She packed what fit in 2 bags, bought a one-way Greyhound ticket, and headed for New York City, convinced, the way only the desperate and the determined can be convinced, that a different city meant a different answer. It did not, but it did give her the brass rail, and a Tuesday night that nobody in that room would ever stop talking about. Tuesday nights at the brass rail were the slow ones. The crowd that came on Tuesdays was not the Friday crowd. No energy, no generosity, no patience for anything that required effort. They came because the drinks were cheap and the bar was 3 blocks from the office, and the week hadn't broken open yet into something worth celebrating. They ate, they drank, they talked at each other. They did not come to listen. The scheduled performer that night was a jazz trio, Marcus, Danny, and Carl. They had played the rail every Tuesday for 7 months. Reliable, comfortable, forgettable in the best possible way. Gerald Hicks, the bar owner, liked them because they kept the room warm without demanding anything from it. At 6:15 that evening, Marcus called. Food poisoning. All 3 of them. Same restaurant, same bad oysters, same result. Gerald took the call in his back office, set the phone down, sat very still for about 10 seconds, then walked out into the bar and looked around at his staff. His eyes stopped on Annie. He remembered she played. She had mentioned it once, 9 months ago, casually, the way people mention things they've learned to keep small. He pulled her aside near the kitchen. He explained the situation in under a minute. She said no before he finished the sentence. He offered $50 extra. She said no. He offered $100. She reached into her apron pocket and touched the folded electric bill she had been carrying for 11 days, the one with the red text across the top that she had stopped letting herself read. She said yes. One condition. She would play her own way. Gerald agreed before she finished the sentence. She had 40 minutes to think about what she'd agreed to. They were the longest 40 minutes of her life. At 8 o'clock, she walked out from behind the bar, carrying a battered acoustic guitar with a crack along the body, sealed with electrical tape, and the brass rail apron still tied around her waist, because there had been no time and no place to take it off. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she had already decided it didn't matter. She was wrong about that. It mattered to the room immediately. But none of that, not Gerald's panic, not the bad oysters, not the electric bill, not the apron, was the most important thing that happened at the brass rail that Tuesday evening. The most important thing happened at 8:07, when the side door opened and a man in a dark jacket walked in alone and chose the corner table farthest from the stage. He ordered a Guinness. He did not look at the menu. He did not look at his phone. He pulled his cap low, and he watched the stage with the focused, unhurried attention of someone who had been in enough small rooms to know that something real can happen in one at any moment. Nobody recognized him. The bar was loud and distracted, and he was just a man in a corner with an untouched drink. But here's what nobody in that room knew yet. That song Annie Calloway was about to play, the one she had chosen because it lived in her chest, because she had reached for it in every dark moment for the past 6 years. Because it was the only song that felt big enough for what she was feeling standing at that microphone, in that apron, in front of that room. He wrote it. Don't go anywhere. Because what happened the moment Annie played that first chord, and what the man in the corner did when the room started laughing, is the part that nobody who was there that night has ever been able to tell without stopping halfway through to collect themselves. And you're about to hear every second of it. The first chord came out wrong, not catastrophically, just slightly off, finger stiff, the pick catching at a bad angle, the sound coming out thin where it should have been warm. Annie adjusted, took a breath, started again. The second attempt was cleaner but slower, and the extra care showed the way extra care always shows when it comes from fear rather than intention. By bar 4, table 3 was laughing. It wasn't aimed at first. Just the ambient laughter of a room confirming out loud what it had already decided. But then table 7 caught it, and then the man near the middle said something short and throwaway that cost him nothing. And the laughter organized itself, became directional, became pointed, became the specific cruelty of a crowd that has found a common target and does not intend to let it go. Annie heard it without hearing the words. She felt it land the way those things always land, somewhere below the ribs. She reached the bridge and lost her place entirely. 10 seconds of silence, not the held breath kind, but the empty kind that fills immediately with other people's conversations resuming around you as though you have already left the stage. She started again from the beginning. It was worse the second time. In the corner, the man in the dark jacket had not moved. He knew this feeling, not as a memory to be described, but as something that still lived in the body after 30 years. The Cavern Club, 1961. Lunchtime sets for factory workers who ate their sandwiches and talked through every song without lowering their voices by a single degree. He remembered the exact weight of a crowd that has decided not to listen. He remembered what it cost to keep going inside that weight. But it was the song that moved him out of his chair. He was hearing someone who understood it the way it was meant to be understood. Not technically, not academically, but from the same place it had come from. She wasn't playing it badly because she didn't care. She was playing it badly because she cared more than this room deserved. He stood up, removed his cap, walked across the floor. Annie's eyes were closed, jaw set, playing by will alone, when the chair beside her scraped the floor and another weight settled onto it. She opened her eyes. Paul McCartney was sitting 8 inches away, calm, still. No drama, no announcement. Just a man who had arrived exactly where he needed to be. "Play it again," he said quietly. "From the start. I've got you." He played the opening bars alone first. Clean, certain, warm. The way the song was always supposed to sound. Full and unhurried and completely without apology. The brass rail heard it and understood in the same instant what they had been hearing before and what they were hearing now. The difference was not subtle. It was not a matter of skill or polish or technique. It was the difference between a song being attempted and a song being inhabited. The bar went silent. Not gradually, all at once. The way a room goes quiet when something happens that language hasn't caught up to yet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. The table that had been laughing loudest went completely, absolutely still. Annie's hands were frozen on the strings. Then Paul glanced at her. Once, small, a nod so slight it was almost nothing, and she placed her fingers on the frets, and she played. Her first notes were unsteady. They still carried the fear from everything that had come before. But Paul's playing didn't waver. It stayed even and warm beneath hers, the way a strong floor holds no matter what is placed on it. She found the melody inside his rhythm, not cleanly, not perfectly, but she found it, and something shifted in her hands, the way feeling returns to something that has been cold for too long, gradually, from the inside out. Her shoulders dropped away from her ears, her jaw unclenched. She stopped surviving and started playing. The table that had laughed loudest sat without moving or speaking. The woman at the bar who had turned her back was now facing forward. The man who had made the comment that landed below Annie's ribs was staring at the floor with his hands flat on the table. Nobody, in that room looked the same as they had 4 minutes ago. When the last note faded, there was a half-second of total silence. Then the brass rail came completely apart. People on their feet. Someone near the back made a sound that wasn't a word. A woman 2 tables from the front was crying quietly, her hand pressed flat against her chest, as though something had moved inside it, and she needed to hold it there. Paul stood. He turned to face the room. He extended one arm toward Annie and said it clearly, loud enough for the whole bar to hear it. This woman right here, she started this. Stay with this. Because what Paul McCartney did next, before he walked out that side door and disappeared into the October night, was something nobody in that room expected. And Annie Calloway didn't understand what it meant until 3 days later, standing alone in her cold kitchen, holding a folded piece of paper with 4 words written on it in plain handwriting. The crowd surged toward the stage. Gerald Hicks stood in the middle of his bar with both hands pressed to the top of his head, unable to form a single word. People were on their feet, moving forward, voices overlapping, the energy in the room building the way it does when a crowd realizes it has witnessed something it will spend years trying to describe accurately to people who weren't there. Paul moved in the opposite direction. He was already heading toward the side door, cap back on, unhurried, the way a man leaves who has never needed his exit to be noticed. He had done this before, slipped out of small rooms while the noise was still loud enough to cover him. He preferred it that way. He had always preferred it that way. He stopped once before he reached the door. He turned back, crossed the floor to Annie, who was still standing at the chair, guitar hanging from one hand, tears moving down her face that she was not yet aware of. The noise of the room was loud enough to make what happened next completely private, even in public. He leaned close. "That song chose you," he said. "Whatever room you're in, whatever they say, that's yours. Don't let anyone take it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pressed a small folded piece of paper into her hand. He didn't explain it. He didn't wait for a response. "Open it when the room gets quiet," he said, "then make the call." He stepped back. He gave the room one easy wave, not a performance, just a quiet acknowledgement, and walked out the side door and into the October night before most people understood he was already gone. The door closed. Annie stood at the chair with a folded piece of paper in one hand and the sound of an entire room in both ears. She did not move for a long time. She opened it at 1 a.m. The bar had emptied. Gerald had locked the front door and gone home. Annie sat alone at the corner table, the same corner where he had been sitting 4 hours earlier, with an untouched drink and eyes that saw something the rest of the room had missed. She unfolded the paper under the low light and read what was written there. A name, a phone number, a recording studio in Midtown Manhattan, and beneath that, in plain, unhurried handwriting, 4 words. "Tell them Paul sent you." She called on Thursday morning. Standing in her kitchen, the electric bill still on the counter, hands steadier than they had been in years. She never released an album, never played a stadium, never became the thing Nashville had told her she needed to become in order to matter. What she became was a session guitarist, first at that studio in Midtown, then at 4 others across the city. She was in the room when the music was made, present for hundreds of recordings across 21 years, invisible in exactly the right way, exactly where she belonged. She never once played out of fear again. Somewhere tonight, a young woman is standing in a room with a cracked guitar and shaking hands, about to play something she loves in front of people who haven't decided yet whether to listen. She doesn't know who's in the room. She only knows the first chord, and the decision, quiet, stubborn, irreversible, to play it anyway. That decision mattered. It always does. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if you want more stories about the moments that never made the headlines, but changed everything, subscribe, because we are just getting started.